California, Super Bowl 37. It is Tampa Bay versus the Oakland Raiders. Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up in the heads intercepted at the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl.
Tom Brady signing with the Tampa Bay Bucs tomorrow. Holy hell.
Everyone always says, why the Bucs, man? Why do you choose the Bucs? And it was a no-brainer.
Brady has all kinds of time. Throws toward the end zone. It is a caught ball. Touchdown, Tampa Bay, Mike Evans. 8 seconds, 7 seconds. Brady to throw. Throws a deep pass downfield. Got Scotty Miller in the open. Makes the catch. Touchdown, Tampa Bay. Super Bowl 55 will be underway at Raymond James Stadium. Here's the snap out of the gun. Play action fake pass to Gronkowski. He's going to score a touchdown. Touchdown, Tampa Bay. Holy guacamole. Bucs are the Super Bowl champs. They can't stop the clock. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to an emergency edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Devin Wanish. Today, we are reacting to the breaking news that fifth-year linebacker Devin White has requested a trade. Now, this has obviously been a hot topic with Devin White in particular because, a month ago, we were talking about some cryptic posts on his Instagram, basically saying farewell to the Tampa Bay fans, thanking the organization, things of that nature. And, we've seen stuff like that before from players that you can usually just write off as oh, this guy's maybe just a little dramatic on social media. But it definitely seems like an uneasy feeling that people have had. But, ultimately that feeling that anyone may have had was confirmed today when the man himself asked for a trade out of Tampa. He's been saying since the day he was drafted that, once that fifth-year deal came around, it was going to be pretty expensive, and he was going to be looking to be a $100 million linebacker in the NFL. Seems like the Bucs were just going to go ahead and let him play out this year and then try to negotiate or get something rolling. Greg Allman had spoken November of last year and talked a little bit about that, the way he had been playing, if he was still a $100 million linebacker. Maybe had mentioned the Bucs and Devin White not necessarily being in the same place on what that compensation would be. Everything that goes into it leads up to today, and we're here talking about it. Evan, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good. I almost said pretty well, but then I also said good, so it said pretty good. But whatever. Right. But definitely a surprise. I think. Because despite what you thought about it, whether you were in favor of an extension for Devin White, whether you were against an extension for Devin White, I think a lot of people figured that, he would remain in Tampa. And let me make this clear. He still may. This does not mean that he's going to be on another team. He's going to get traded. He very well may not be traded. Trade requests happen a lot, and they don't always come to fruition. So I would keep an eye on the trade front for sure, but it's not a slam dunk, I don't think. Now, you pretty much nailed it. I think the Bucs' expectation was that he was going to play on the fifth-year option and that they were going to take a look at his play from that year. And then, hey, if the $20 million offer, which, hasn't really been confirmed, but it just, he mentioned it, he made that comment at the combine, and then there's been some rumblings, but nothing really concrete that oh, that's the number he's looking for, but you can infer a lot from that. And so I think the Bucs were going to look at a contract extension at that point, but obviously Devin White likely wants it now. And I'm sure the Bucs wouldn't mind doing it now, but this signals to me that they're pretty far apart. And I think that Devin White is maybe thinking that we're so far apart that there's nothing that can be done to get us closer to a number that makes sense for both sides. So we'll see what happens. And obviously, we're about 2 weeks away, about 2.5 weeks away from the draft, I think. So I would think you'd obviously want to do this before obviously either before the draft or on draft night. So you can, you get picks to find a replacement, because if you were to trade him, that's a huge, huge piece of your defense. Despite, whatever you think of him, still a starter, and it's a significant part of a Todd Bowles defense. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, and it was definitely a surprise coming out this afternoon.
Yeah, first round pick in the 2019 NFL draft over the 4 seasons in Tampa Bay. Obviously, a Super Bowl championship in 2020 with Tom Brady at the helm. 2019, 91 combined tackles, 2.5 sacks, and a pick. 2020, 140 tackles, his highest so far. 9 sacks that season, which a lot of people gave him praise for. Probably his best season thus far. 2021, 128 combined tackles, 3.5 sacks. 2022, 124 combined tackles, 5.5 sacks. A total of 483, 20.5 sacks, and 1 interception in his career. Now, something that Devin White has always gotten a lot of criticism for is a couple things. One of them is a lack of consistency. And I think that was especially highlighted in the beginning of, was it the 2021 season? No, it was 2022 after they beat Dallas, when he said sometimes he just gets a little bored out there, right?
Well, it was after they beat the Falcons
at home, and they were sitting at 2-0. Yeah.
They were up. No, it wasn't. It was week 4 or 5. It was week 5, because it was after that Kansas City, like when the defense
right.
got shredded.
They were 2-0 after beating New Orleans.
And the Bucs were up 21-0, and the Falcons started to come back in the fourth quarter, and that's because Devin White was asked about, defense, you have a 21-0 lead, like shut the door, and then he said that, like, get a little bored sometimes. Yeah, it's just not wise. Not a wise comment.
Yeah, definitely not. We're not going to get on here and say anything about Devin White's character. That's for everyone else to get on Twitter and talk about. I've always kind of liked him as a player. I never thought he was the best team first guy, but I mean, here we are. He won't be in the red and pewter next year, more than likely. Had a couple of inkling feelings that obviously he had always talked about what his market was going to be, but he's made cryptic posts in the past that love to get people going on Instagram, and I feel like a lot of the players that do that, it's just sooner or later, you really can't be surprised when you see him in the news for something like this. So Devin White, great player. Could be better. I think a lot of those criticisms and what he brought to the Bucs defense, most people would categorize him as, and this isn't my direct take, this is just what I've heard a lot, maybe an overglorified off-ball linebacker, because he's fast, doesn't make every single tackle, and his biggest weakness is his coverage. And I don't know how much better that got in 2022, but even with the impressive tackle numbers, I think a lot of the people who are critical on the film of Devin White definitely don't have $100 million contract things to say about him.
Yeah, and that's not to say it, and I'm not as low on Devin White as some people. There's some people who think he shouldn't even be a starter in the NFL. I think he's a starting caliber player, but at the same time, if you're looking for $100 million, you're not a $100 million player. So if that's what he's asking for, you kind of got to hope that the Bucs stick to their guns here and not cave in. And I think John Ledyard sort of said the same thing on Twitter. He hopes that the Bucs don't cave into Devin White's contract demands, because, they've done a good job of identifying the players that they want to keep long term, and they keep them long term. And then they do a good job of identifying the players that don't really fit in the plans, and they let them walk. So I think they really need to do that here. They need to make that decision, and I hope that the decision of paying him $100 million versus, and we don't know exactly what value he has in a trade, but versus probably a day 2 pick. Like, you're probably getting a day 2 pick back in a trade, either a late second, maybe an early / mid 3rd round picks, one of those two. You have to weigh that. What's more valuable to you? Because also, it's what we talked about, I believe, with like Russell Gage. Like, if you want to get rid of the player, you got to replace the player. So you have to weigh the replacements as well for Devin White. And we'll talk a little bit in a few minutes here about some options they have. They're not much in the free agent market. There wasn't much in the there was a lot in the free agent market to begin with. Quickly dried up there. Obviously, the Bucs re-signed Levante David, but now sitting here mid-April, you're not gonna find. I mean, maybe there might be a veteran or two still sitting there that could make sense, but you're not gonna find a guy who's gonna be spectacular for you on April 11th or April 12th, whatever that may be. So, you're probably going to have to look to the draft for a replacement, and maybe you use the pick that you get for Devin White as that capital to find that replacement. But like I said, we'll see. This could very well end. It could be a negotiation tactic. Devin White leaks that, hey, what he wants out, the Bucs cave in, give him the offer he wants. It could very well be the case, and we'll just have to wait and see. I don't think that he's going to get traded immediately. Like, I don't think tonight you're going to hear news about him traded. I think it's going to take some time. I think it could be a few days leading up to the draft. It could be on draft night. Who knows? But obviously, things are appearing to be heading towards a breakup between the two sides.
Yeah, and one of the things you had mentioned, I just wanted to reiterate, was Jason Light and the Bucs' ability over the last few years to kind of shed some players that were, hey, maybe you're taking a little bit more of a risk here by letting this guy walk, or maybe trading this guy away wasn't your best option, or maybe cutting your number one corner in the middle of a season. Maybe that could come back to bite you in the ass. But it seems like when you look at those moves, the Bucs usually end up on the right side of things, but again, this is a much bigger move, or at least a much bigger feeling move, not necessarily because Devin White is a $100 million linebacker, because I don't think he was going to get paid that here in Tampa, truthfully. But he's a first-round pick. You know what I mean?
Top five pick.
Top five pick. Just to reiterate that all the way back in 2019, which feels like just yesterday. It's kind of crazy that we're already looking at year 5 of this guy's career. But it is a much bigger deal because of the pick. And like, we have often regarded this guy, whatever opinion you have on Devin White as a player, we've usually touted him as one of the top 3, top 4 players on this defense every year since he's been here. I mean, aside from maybe 2019 when you were still figuring out what you had in him. But after that, man, after that 2020 season, you want to talk about, Devin White's head getting a little big maybe. But you want to talk about the fans and all the good things they had to say about him. You want to talk about all the analysts who said he was the best linebacker in the NFL following that 2020 season. You remember just as well as I do. There were more than a few notable people saying, hey, this guy is the best bar for bar linebacker in the NFL. And listen, he had a little run on that 2020 Super Bowl run. He had a great run. Let's give that defense all the credit they deserve. Again, Devin White, great player. But 2021 and 2022 did not tell me he was a $100 million linebacker. And
it just seems like he hasn't adjusted. It seems like he's living off of the splash plays, and he's not living off of what actually gets a linebacker paid that money. Now, one of the reasons he may not be traded is I'm sure he wants to he'll basically say, like, hey,
he wants to be the highest paid linebacker in the NFL. And is there a team in the NFL right now that wants to make him the highest paid linebacker in the league?
And here's the thing, like, okay, let's say the Bucs are talking with Team X, and Devin White says, well, I want this. And Team X goes, we ain't giving you that. And Devin White says, well, I'm not, then you're either going to have me as a 1-year rental, or I just won't play for you. You can trade for me, but I won't play for you. Why is Team X going to give the Bucs anything to get this guy? So, and also, I mean, just because the trade request, that does not mean that if the Bucs hold on to him, that he's going to be holding out. Like, that doesn't mean he won't be playing. We don't know that yet. We have no idea yet. But it is crazy that sort of Devin White has some leverage here because he can really dictate the type of offer that Tampa Bay gets. Now, if a team can come to terms, like if Devin White's like, yeah, like, hey, like I want this, this, and this, and the team's like, okay, we'll give you that, that, and that. And then, that all of a sudden becomes much more valuable to that team. Devin White becomes much more valuable, and now that team may offer up that 3rd round pick, that 2nd round pick for Devin White. So, I think it's going to be an interesting few weeks here leading up to the draft to see what happens with this scenario. And you're right. You hit the nail right on the head with 2020. His regular season was up and down 2020, but his playoff run, he was a big reason they won that Super Bowl. And then 2021 and 2022, he was fine. But that's not $100 million player. Roquan Smith just got $100 million from the Baltimore Ravens. That's not Devin White. Like, Roquan Smith is not Devin White. And just for comparison, because Roquan Smith was recently just traded because his team didn't want to pay him. Roquan Smith was traded from the Bears to the Ravens for a 2nd and a 5th round pick. So I think Roquan Smith is probably a little bit highly regarded. More highly regarded than Devin White, I should say. So I wouldn't necessarily expect that same compensation. I would say probably a little bit less. But I do think that's on the right path. Maybe a 3rd round pick and like a 7th round pick or something as a return. But we'll see if he's traded at all.
Yeah, wanted to talk about the possible trade scenarios for Devin White, given what we know now. Devin White requesting a trade because he doesn't want to play in the 5th-year option in Tampa Bay. The Bucs do not want to extend his contract as of right now. They were hoping he would play on the 5th year and negotiate next year when that cap hit comes in. They have a little bit more money to really throw on the table at him if they wanted to.
Yes, and Adam Schefter said that the Bucs do not want to trade him.
Yeah, the Bucs made it clear they don't want to trade him. Schefter, just like you had confirmed there. And, unless a team wants to come in and make him the highest paid linebacker in the NFL while also compensating the Bucs, it just doesn't seem likely. So we are at kind of a stalemate, but that obviously does not rule out something happening on draft night, which as of right now, I think if we're going to see this happen somewhat soon, draft night's going to be your best chance. Now, there's obviously a couple of scenarios there, but what are you thinking here as far as Devin White, and how soon do we see this play out? Is this something that, drags out past maybe, hopefully not in a training camp, then you have a real problem.
Yeah, and that's what the Bucs are going to want to avoid, right? You're going to want to avoid this being a distraction for as much as you can. So, I do think. See, and that's the thing. We don't know if he's holding out or not. Like, has he given the Bucs indication that, hey, like, if I'm not traded, like, I'm not playing for you, like, unless I get a new contract? We don't know. So, if that's the case, then I think the pressure ramps up on the Buccaneers to get a deal done. And I would expect if a deal does get done, I would be very, very surprised if it didn't happen some point, either a day or two leading up to the draft or over that weekend, because I just think the Bucs have to take advantage of it in this year's draft. I don't think trading him for 2024 picks would be awfully smart. I think you should be better served getting the picks for this year and trying to get the guys in that you want to build this thing around this year. The other thing that's interesting, and maybe a reason why the Bucs are a little bit hesitant. We talk about, okay, Devin White's in year 5 now, right? It's always crazy to me because I can't believe Tristan Wirfs is going into year 4. Like, that's what's always puts in my mind. And this isn't about Tristan Wirfs. It's
just the time.
Well, no, this isn't about Tristan Wirfs at all. Like, Tristan Wirfs will get his 5th-year option picked up, whatever. This is about the other guy that has his contract up the same time that Devin White does. That's Antoine Winfield Jr. He does not have a 5th-year option. That's a 4-year rookie deal. So that means his contract is up this coming off season, after the season. So the Buccaneers likely looked at it and were like, man, like, if you're paying Devin White $100 million, you might be hard pressed to pay Antoine Winfield Jr. what he wants. And we don't know exactly what he wants, but I think it's going to be a good bit of money. So, and I think the Bucs are wise to prioritize Antoine Winfield Jr. over Devin White. So that's another reason, not to mention that Tristan Wirfs may be signing in 2 years' time, maybe signing the biggest contract for an offensive lineman in NFL history. So,
hey, I would not be shocked one bit if we saw Tristan Wirfs go ahead and lock himself up as a Buck before that critical negotiation period. You know what I mean? Does it a year early, gets it out of the way. We saw Vita Vea do it. He wasn't due for a contract for another season or two, and he locks him up with a long-term extension. So as far as Antoine Winfield Jr. goes, just like you said, that's another guy that could obviously maybe break the safety market depending on what his play in 2023
possibly
looks like. Yeah. I mean, he is definitely a top 5 safety in the NFL without a doubt right now. So with that being said, this stuff does give the Bucs a little more flexibility to sign future guys like Antoine Winfield Jr., who could have gotten away from him if they had prioritized Devin White and giving him what that market calls for, which is a lot more than probably what a safety would get paid on that same deal. And then obviously Tristan Wirfs coming into the fold as well.
And here's a tough thing, and Greg Allman makes a great point. He just tweeted out. He said, "My question: why now? Why does Devin White wait until a month into free agency when teams have spent most of their money and filled most of their needs to ask for a trade? More than half the league doesn't even have the cap space to take on a $11.7 million salary. And by the way, that's guaranteed. So that's a 5th-year option. There is no restructuring that. There is no nothing. Now, if a team would agree to an extension, you can bring that cap hit down for this year. You can do that. As I remember, a lot of people were like, well, a way they can save cap space, the Bucs, is by extending Devin White, because you can lower that 2023 cap hit. So you can do that. But yeah, why now? Because it puts, not only if Devin White wants to be gone, it puts him in a pigeonhole, but it also puts the Buccaneers in a pigeonhole, because now there's going to be less suitors than there were a month ago at this time. So some people, I'm sure, would have been interested in Devin White. They've moved on. They've signed other linebackers. They've made other moves. They've traded away draft picks. So it is interesting, and I do think that's something that you're just going to have to keep in the back of your mind when you're talking about these negotiations. And again, why I said that a trade is not a slam dunk. And that's another reason why I don't think a trade is a slam dunk. It's certainly, I think, obviously, certainly increases the likelihood of a trade. But I don't think it's 100% a guarantee that he's going to get dealt. And that's another big reason why.
Yeah. Now, as we start to wrap this thing up, one more thing I wanted to mention. There's a glaring hole at linebacker now. You got Levante David back. Yeah, you got Levante David back for another season. But in the scenario that Devin White is dealt, either the night of the draft or between now and week 1 of the NFL season, you're going to have to basically put another player there. And to find another linebacker at this stage of free agency that is as good as Devin White, probably not going to happen. To find another linebacker that's as good as Devin White in the NFL draft in round 1, 2, or 3, Evan, is the question I wanted to ask you. How likely does that look now for the Bucs to maybe target a linebacker in those early rounds? And are there any that you like? I mean, finding a guy who's going to come in and perform, pick up right where Devin White left off, that's a pretty tall task. And I can't imagine, any day 2 or 3 picks are going to come in here and do that for the organization right off of the bat. But they're going to address this the best way they know how. And again, with the limited resources, with free agency winding down and that list of names getting shorter, it seems like the draft may be the Bucs' best option. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, and the thing about it is, it probably is the best option if you're looking for an immediate replacement. But if you're looking for an immediate replacement in round 1, might be disappointed.
Hey, actually, you know what? I sorry not to cut you off.
Go ahead.
But before we even talk about the draft, I mean, you want to talk about immediate replacements? Is there anything on the roster, maybe like a KJ Britt?
I just don't know if KJ Britt has shown you enough in this limited action. I know it's been limited, but
there's a lot of guys on this Bucs defense who are going to be starting, and that's the question.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, they just paid Anthony Nelson whatever the hell they paid him. The question is, has he showed you enough? And that's kind of the tone of this Bucs team this year. So I guess I want to talk about that possibility too, because it's not the sexy possibility, but I do think it's a little more realistic given the circumstances.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, are you really going to give Levante David and maybe final year in the NFL as running mate's going to be KJ Britt? I mean, Britt just hasn't shown enough athleticism to play linebacker on top of his defense. And just their depth at linebacker has been terrible for years. Kevin Minter was a fine backup, but then he started to get cooked. Towards the 2021 season, he was cooked. And then but if Devin White or Levante David went down for an extended period of time, they were screwed. And luckily that didn't really happen in the few years that they were together. But their depth at linebacker hasn't been too good. So I just don't know if you can. I understand that, yes, they're going to give younger players opportunities. They know that the Super Bowl contention window has closed. At the same time, Todd Bowles is trying to win football games. His job may depend on it. And does he really think KJ Britt as the starting linebacker on this team is going to get the job done? I just don't know. So I think while, it's a possibility, it is a possibility. I just think that they could really look to whatever they trade for Devin White. They could look to turn that into his replacement. So I have three names though, and none of these three are going to be guys at 19th overall. And we'll get into the draft. We were actually going to get into it probably the next episode, but the next episode turned into this episode. So now next episode we will be getting into the draft. But as far as 19th overall, I don't see it. I don't see any fits. Now, could they maybe trade down further in the draft into the late 20s, pick up another day 2 pick, and then get one? Maybe. But I'm looking at the second round and a few guys. There's Drew Sanders from Arkansas, who I wrote a draft profile on for BucsNation.com, so go ahead and check that out. Drew Sanders from Arkansas, kind of a Swiss Army knife for the Arkansas defense. Can rush the passer. Reminds me a lot of he's a skinnier type, but like a Micah Parsons. He can rush the passer. He can play coverage. He can do a lot of different things. The other one's Jack Campbell, who from Iowa, who I'm a pretty big fan of. He'll probably be a day 2 pick. I think Drew Sanders is the only one who might sneak into round 1. He could be a guy in the back half of round 1, maybe, but I think Jack Campbell is going to be a day 2 pick. And then another day 2 pick is Deion Henley from Washington State. He's climbing up some boards. I think he was going to be like a late 3rd, early 4th round pick. Now it wouldn't surprise if he's a 2nd round pick. So I think those are the 3 names that make the most sense if you're looking to find an immediate replacement who's going to come in and be a starter. And look, then the Bucs need like their draft picks, especially their early ones, like their first 3 or 4 picks, they need to be guys that come in and contribute immediately. Like they have to be. So, and we'll talk about that more and why that's such a necessity. We have a couple of draft shows coming up. We have plenty of time to talk about that. But linebacker to replace Devin White, Jack Campbell, Drew Sanders, Deion Henley, all those guys, they're coming in. They're going to be an immediate contributor. Like they are going to be a contributor right away. So I think that would be a bonus. Outside of those guys, I mean, you have Noah Sewell, who is the brother of Penei Sewell from the Detroit Lions tackle. So Noah Sewell was actually a really highly regarded player, but hasn't really played as good as people hoped he would. So he'll probably be a late 2nd, 3rd round pick. He's the possibility. Past that, though, it really drops off, and it's not the strongest linebacker class to begin with. So I think if you're looking for an immediate replacement, I think one of those 4 guys, but more specifically, one of the first 3 that I mentioned, Jack Campbell, Drew Sanders, Deion Henley, as those immediate replacement guys who can also be pretty productive.
It'll be something to monitor here as we obviously get closer to the NFL draft and continue to look for a replacement now. For former Bucs linebacker Devin White.
Well, I wouldn't say former.
That's true. Former. That's true. It is not over until it is over. So with that being said, did want to wrap it up with this tidbit of information from Greg Allman just on the cap space and what it would take to make a move for Devin White. Obviously, making him the highest paid linebacker in the NFL is one thing, but as it stands, only 7 NFL teams have $20 million in cap space. The Cardinals, the Panthers, the Bears, Lions, Packers, Colts, and the Eagles. And any team acquiring Devin White would probably need to be committed to paying him top-tier linebacker money.
And here's the problem.
Here's the problem. The top of that inside linebacker market looks like this. Roquan Smith, 5 years, $100 million. Shaq Leonard, 5 years, $98 million. Fred Warner, 5 years, $95 million. Tremaine Edmonds, 4 years, $72 million, and CJ Mosley rounding it out, 5 years, $85 million. The $1 million question, where does Devin White fit into that equation?
Well, mention the teams again with $20 million or more in cap space.
The Cardinals?
Yep.
The Panthers?
Yep.
The Bears? The Lions? The Packers? The Colts? And the Eagles.
One team makes sense. It's the Eagles, and they're the team that historically has not put much value on the linebacker position. So is Howie Roseman, the GM of the Eagles, is he really going to sit there and say, not only are we going to give up a day 2 pick for Devin White, but we're also going to pay him $100 million. He's rarely done that with linebackers. It's just the Eagles don't operate that way. So the one team on there that makes the most sense is the Eagles. And they're the one team that I know their philosophy hasn't been spending big time resources at the linebacker position. So again, would not be surprising if a trade does not happen. It certainly could, and like I said, the possibility has rose significantly. But this is not a slam dunk to happen.
So let me ask you one more question before we wrap up shop here. If he does not get traded, doesn't get signed, dealt, what does he do? Does he refuse to play? I mean, does Devin White strike you as a guy who would refuse to play? Because personally, for me, it's kind of 50-50. I really don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. You don't know what his mindset is. I mean, because at the same time, if you play, let's say, all right, I'm gonna play on the 5th-year option, I'm gonna prove him wrong. Let's say he gets hurt. He's screwed if he gets hurt. Like he could play his way into, $100 million contract. He could certainly play his way out of it, but he could also get hurt and get out of it. So I think he wants that commitment, and it's tough because you don't know. You have no idea. Is he really done with the team, or is this sort of a leverage thing, a negotiation thing, or is he like unless you're paying me, like I'm not putting on a Bucs uniform ever again. So I would think based on what I've seen and stuff. I mean, Roquan Smith played, like he played. But I think he might hold out. It wouldn't surprise me if he held out. But at the same time, like if you want to get a trade, like going deeper into the summer, that's not going to help you. Like the best thing that may help you get your trade or even get your money is by playing and playing well. Like that may and then maybe even the Bucs are the team to do it. And then players don't want to leave. Players don't typically want to leave because you have to pack up your entire family, your entire life. He has developed a life in Tampa for the last 4 years now. Imagine, saying to whoever you live with, hey, yeah, we're going to pack up. It's not that easy. So players typically want to stay. So if the Bucs are offering the money he wants, sure. I'm sure he would like to stay, but right now it's not happening. And it doesn't seem like it's going to happen unless he starts to prove it, which again, does Devin White feel like it is worth the risk? And that I don't know.
High risk, high reward here for the Bucs. Wait and see how this thing plays
out.
For
Devin White. Devin White.
Absolutely. The clock is ticking for both sides. Again, as we are just a couple of weeks away from the NFL draft, we will keep you guys updated, obviously, on potential replacements for Devin White and some more defensive prospects on the next episode of the Cannon Fire podcast. But that's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on an emergency edition of the pod. Go find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL. And check out his written work at BucsNation.com. I know you got some draft profiles, but anything else you got this week?
Yeah, gonna keep up with the profiles. I covered the Devin White stuff. And then also for people that are listening to this premiered, you guys get a sneak peek, but by the time most people listen to this, they'll probably be out. I'm going to be looking at just a few possible destinations for Devin White that could make some sense. Not necessarily looking at cap situations. I'll try my best to make sure it's as realistic as possible. But just some teams that maybe to keep an eye on.
Looking forward to it. Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram and Twitter at Rhettakus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. But that's the show. Thank you guys once again for listening. We'll catch you in the next one. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.